Hello and welcome to Mount St. Mary's Seminary in Emmitsburg, Maryland. I'm Father Charles Connor and I am a member of the seminary faculty. And this program that we are presenting to you is being presented right here on Mary's Holy Mountain in the hamlet of Emmitsburg, Maryland. Our seminary was begun in the year 1808 by refugees from the French Revolution, Father Jean Dubois, Father Simon Broutet, so many other wonderful French exiles who could no longer stay in their native France. In 1808, they began what ultimately would become both a college and a seminary, and we have been operating as such, a college and a seminary on Mary's Holy Mountain ever since. It was also in this small hamlet of Emmitsburg that St. Elizabeth Seton with a band of the original Sisters of Charity came just down the street from where we are. She also taught CCD on the mountaintop just overlooking our property, where there is a very, very beautiful grotto of Lourdes, which Mother Seton herself did not know, but which came into existence in 1875, less than 2 decades after the apparitions of Our Lady to St. Bernadette in the mountains of the Pyrenees in France, and the first Lourdes grotto in the United States of America. So believe you me, we are in a tremendously significant area of Maryland for United States Catholic history. It was also to this very holy mountain that a young man would come as a seminarian all the way from Oklahoma in the year 1959. He would spend 4 years and he would be ordained to the priesthood in 1963. His name was Stanley Francis Rother. And today in this program, we are so very, very happy to refer to him as Blessed Stanley Francis Rother. So first, a bit about his life, his years, his work, and finally, his martyrdom. The Second Vatican Council, as we know, it took place in the early 1960s. During the course of the Second Vatican Council, Pope, now St. John the 23rd, asked the Church in North America if she might consider sending missionaries to South and Central America. One of the most significant responses to John the 23rd's request, of course, came from His Eminence Richard Cardinal Cushing in Boston when he began the Missionary Society of St. James the Apostle. Another response to that call of St. John the 23rd came from the Diocese of Oklahoma City and Tulsa in the state of Oklahoma. In the early 1960s, the entire state of Oklahoma was one diocese, and it was called the Diocese of Oklahoma City and Tulsa. Today, of course, we have the Archdiocese of Oklahoma City, from which ultimately was carved the present-day Diocese of Tulsa. Back in the early 1960s, as we say, this was not the case. The entirety of Oklahoma consisted of only one Catholic diocese. And this Diocese of Oklahoma City and Tulsa began in 1964 to start sending missionary priests and missionary sisters and missionary lay people, generally speaking, all natives of Oklahoma. They went to a place in the rural highlands of southwest Guatemala, to the parish of St. James the Apostle in a locale referred to as Santiago Atiyan. Now, in that state of Oklahoma, in the town of Okarche, Oklahoma, in 1935 was born Stanley Francis Rother. He was born to German Catholic parents. German on both sides, his mother's and his father's. He was the one of 5 children born to Franz and Gertrude Schmidt Rother.
Stan was born, I'll never forget. We had the worst dust storm that we had during the Dust Bowl days. And the day that Stan was born, I had my firstborn colt, baby colt, and he had his leg broken. We had to splint the colt the same day that Stan was born. I thought, boy, is life going to be like this? Have a baby one day and have a dust storm and a broken leg on a colt the same day.
Well, as we say, he was born in 1935. He was a farmer through and through, as was his father, as was his grandfather. They knew the land. They knew how to till the soil. They knew hard work, and they knew extraordinarily hard work, and that is something that was going to pay off in Stanley's life in later years.
When it got time for me to run the equipment, then he was gone off to school, and then I took over. But before that, when he run the combines and such, I run a tractor and did things in the field like that.
Did he like farming?
Oh yes, he always loved farming. We put up a lot of hay off of this field right here. Alfalfa, hauled it in the hard way. Just drop it on the ground and pick one bale up and put it on the truck and load the truck and then take it to the barn, take it right up there to that barn and put it in the barn, and then all winter long you pull it back out and feed the cattle, and then you got to clean the barn out to get it out for the last time.
He belonged to Holy Trinity Parish in Okarche, Oklahoma. He went to their grade school, he went to their high school. And those schools were staffed by the Sisters Adorers of the Precious Blood. That is significant because Stanley Rother's own sister would ultimately enter that religious order. And in religious life, she was known as Sister Martyr. So there was Sister Martyr, there was Father Stanley, and 3 other siblings in the family. An extraordinarily devout Catholic household, but many people felt that young Stanley would probably follow in his father's stead and take over the family farm, which was an enormous farm, several hundred acres to be worked. And there is where he would live the rest of his life in the area where he was born and raised. Stanley, however, had other plans, and as the years went on, this boy, who had been a very, very devout altar boy, a very splendid young man, highly thought of, highly regarded, praised well by everyone, decided that he did indeed want to study to become a priest. That was his ultimate goal, and my dear friends, there were many, many barriers that got in the way before 1963, when he could kneel on the floor of the cathedral in Oklahoma City and be ordained a priest by Bishop Victor J. Reed. He went first to a prep school, and then he entered Assumption Seminary in San Antonio, Texas. He did his first year of philosophy, and he had to repeat the entire thing. He repeated the year of philosophy, went into theology, and at the end of the first half of the first year of theology, he was told that he had failed his courses once again.
His father was a little surprised that he was going to go to the seminary. They were very supportive, but very, very surprised. And then after entering the seminary, he had a few challenges, which I'm sure you know, particularly with Latin. He was basically, let go of a previous seminary because of his struggles in academics, particularly in Latin.
When Stan mentioned something to me about going to the seminary, I says, "Why, Stan?" I says, "Why did you take FFA instead of Latin?" I said, "Now you're going to have to take Latin courses," but it all worked out. It just all seemed to fit in. There was a reason for it.
The rector of that seminary in San Antonio, however, saw a great deal of good in Stanley Rother. He wrote to the director of seminarians in Oklahoma City, "We found him always cooperative in every respect, a solid man. Our only difficulty was in the matter of his intellectual ability." Well, Bishop Victor Reed saw something in this young man. In fact, he saw a great deal in him. He saw a tremendous amount in him. He saw this ardent desire to be a priest, most particularly to be a parish priest. He knew that in all probability, Stanley Rother was not going to become a theologian teaching in the university. That was not his goal. That was not his desire. Rather, it was to serve God's people in the parish. So Bishop Reed wanted to give him another chance, and he wrote to Monsignor George Mulcahy, who in the 1950s was indeed our rector here at Mount St. Mary's, and he asked, through his director of seminarians, he asked if the Mount might be able to give Stanley another try at studying for the priesthood. Monsignor Mulcahy agreed, and the director of seminarians in the Diocese of Oklahoma City wrote back, and he said to Monsignor Mulcahy, "We appreciate very much your having a look at Stanley. We hope he will not disappoint you." Well, he did anything but disappoint. And to that letter of gratitude was added a word from Stanley's pastor. He comes from an excellent God-fearing father and mother. He is a hard worker and he is consistent. It is very difficult for Stanley to learn, but he is an excellent, excellent boy.
I first knew Stan in the seminary in San Antonio. He was a farm boy from Okarche, very quiet, so he wasn't obtrusive or anything of that sort. Very quiet young man who studied, was very sincere, very diligent in his work, but he did those things that he was able to excel in. And the things that he was able to excel in were like farm work, fixing things, fix-it man, and electrician, and all kinds of things of that sort.
And yet another letter came to Monsignor Mulcahy from a priest, a friend of the family, who was rector of a seminary in Oklahoma, St. Francis Prep Seminary. He wrote and he said, "I realize it takes a certain intelligence to get along in the seminary, but I think he would make a fine parish priest. He is determined to become one. I hope and pray he makes it." Well, that priest's prayers certainly were answered. Monsignor Mulcahy noticed a change in young Stanley Rother as he began his studies here at the Mount. His marks were good. They were consistently good. They stayed good. And there was no difficulty whatsoever, first of all, admitting him to minor orders, as we had in those days, then to the diaconate, and finally in the month of May 1963, to the priesthood in the Diocese of Oklahoma City and Tulsa. He was ordained, he served a number of parochial assignments in that diocese, and then, very, very much of his own accord, he signed up to go to this mission at Santiago Atian in southwest Guatemala. He arrived in 1968, and he stayed there until his death on July 28th, 1981.
I think the parish there in Guatemala is very special. The people are very special. About 95% of the people are Indian, Mayan Indian. And of those, about 75%, as much as we can tell, are Catholic.
When he went to Guatemala, it seemed that he found a niche. He found his place. He found people that he was able to identify with, that he felt that he was able to give something to, that he was able to help them, he was able to raise them up. And that was the work that he worked at.
He not only knew the Spanish language, but he also knew the native dialect of the people, so that he could speak to them, so that he could, after Vatican II, say Mass in their native dialect, so that he could do radio programming, Catholic radio programming in Guatemala. His farming talents came in tremendously, tremendously handy, because not only had he been a farmer as a young boy, but every year in the summer as a seminarian, he would go back and he would very, very much help his father and the farm hands. But he put those farming skills to good use in Guatemala. On one occasion, we read, he operated a bulldozer from 7 o'clock in the morning till 4:30 in the afternoon to clear land on local farms. All he did was stop once to say Mass. His door was open to all people. There was one old man to whom he served lunch every single day. Many people came to him to ask his advice on personal matters and also on financial matters.
He was such a servant of the people. Stanley had the heart of a servant. It was what the priesthood should be about. And sometimes we're more successful on that on some days than others, as we all know. But he had the heart of a servant, and that heart of the servant was alive every single day in that man.
And I would say, first and foremost, there's certainly perennial characteristics and qualities of a priest that Father Rother highlights and he lived in his life. The first and foremost that I can think of is that selfless love for his people. He speaks volumes about that to seminarians today. People are looking for their priests literally, and they should look for their priests to lay down their life as a good shepherd. As Christ laid down his life for us, so we're to lay down our lives for our people as shepherds of the local flock.
South America, as we know so very well, has been an area of the world that has had tremendous political conflict. You have right-wing governments, you have leftist guerrillas constantly fighting it out, not simply in Guatemala, but in so many of the countries in South and Central America. And it was into this political turmoil that not terribly long after Father Rother arrived in Guatemala, he was thrown into it, he became a part of it, and he saw the intensity of it getting worse and worse and worse. One priest after another was marked out for violence. Priests left because they were too scared to stay in Guatemala. Others met with very, very foul play, and of course, some indeed met with death. So it was a logical progression through the final year or two of the 1960s, all through the decade of the 1970s. And Father Rother knew that they would be getting closer and closer to him, because the more he chose to speak out against injustice, in whatever way, shape, or form it took, the more he would be threatened with violence and indeed with death.
He could be in the midst of any kind of a storm, theological or otherwise, and just keep sailing ahead, keeping his eyes on the Lord Jesus Christ, the one about whom all of us should be concerned, and not paying too much attention to the storm around him. And he went down there to Guatemala, and he knew what his mission was. And if you recall, when he went to that parish, it has been said that very few people were practicing their faith. But because of his simplicity and his loving care for those good people, all of a sudden that began to change, and people began to come to Mass, and people began to worship God once again, because they saw in their midst a shepherd after the heart of Christ. And he spent his time there doing that, and there's a tremendous and an enormous love for him by those good people, and that came alive.
He wrote an interesting letter to a friend of his in January of 1981, talking about a catechist who was staying with him in the rectory. He said, "This person was probably the most sought-after catechist. He's been staying here off and on, almost constantly of late. He's been eating and sleeping here, usually visiting with his wife and 2 children in the afternoon." As he was approaching on Saturday evening, he was intercepted by a group of 4 kidnappers. "I realized then," writes Blessed Stanley, "I had just witnessed a kidnapping of someone that we had gotten to know and love." He said, "I got back into the rectory after he had been kidnapped, and I got a cramp in my back. I got a cramp in my back from the anger I felt that this friend was being taken off to be tortured for a day or 2 and then brutally murdered for wanting nothing more than better conditions for his people."
Every day, Father Stan was looking along the roadsides, in the fields, going to village police centers, looking everywhere for Diego, his body. And it was about a week later when he said, with tears in his eyes, in his very quiet way, he said, "Do you think Diego knew that I couldn't help him?" because he cared deeply for Diego. And Diego was a symbol of the oppression that had been happening and a symbol of the people that he loved so dearly.
Stanley never political bone in him. Justice, oh yeah. Justice and rights. Yeah, but political, in the true sense of the word, politic. No. Showing justice is his struggle to see that the people had something better. His constant struggle and not desire for that. Just his great desire for education available to the people, for those that wanted it. Getting involved in this farm out here outside of town so badly. He wanted to do that. So that's in that sense, justice. And then in another sense, justice, very strong justice, is in his desire to see that the people had an opportunity to really learn about who Jesus really is.
He writes to another friend, the reality is we are in danger here in Santiago Atiyan. There is a chance that the government will back off. If I get a direct threat or I'm told to leave, then I will go. But if it is my destiny that I should give my life here, then so be it. I do not want to desert these people. There is still an awful lot of good that can be done here under the circumstances. Father Rother did receive a very, very serious threat on his life, and he decided that it probably would be a good idea to go back to Oklahoma for a time and visit with his family. During the course of that visit in the early winter of 1981, Father Rother, Blessed Stanley Rother, made a phone call to the then rector of this seminary, Monsignor Harry Flynn. He is now Archbishop Harry Flynn. He's the Archbishop Emeritus of the Archdiocese of Minneapolis and St. Paul, and he asked if it would be all right if he came here to his alma mater in Emmitsburg to pray and to think.
He called me from Guatemala, and he asked if he could come back to the Mount and spend a week. And I met him at Dulles Airport, and immediately when he got off the plane, I met him right at the gate, and he got off the plane and he began to tell me immediately what his concerns were. He said, terrible things are happening to the Indian people in Guatemala. If they would ask for just a few cents more for picking coffee beans, a truck would come into the village that night, stop at the home of the one who was asking for a little more money, and then that person would be taken out to the country, tortured and killed, and the body thrown into a well to poison the well. In other words, to give an example to the others not to be asking for more money. And he told me this in horror, and he said, if I speak, they're going to kill me, but if I keep quiet, what kind of a pastor will I be?
So what does he do? He comes back here to the Mount, to the place of discernment, and he's able to discern God's will for him of whether he should go back or not. His bishop even said, you really shouldn't. You're gonna be killed. You won't come back alive.
He knew the risk that he was taking, and we knew it, and he wanted to do it. And that was, again, an expression of the depth of his dedication, of his love for his people. So I had an obligation to tell him that, look, there's a great danger. You might not come back alive. And he knew that. I wanted him to know that very clearly. And he did. But he always said a shepherd should be with his people. He should not run away from them when there's a time of danger.
If you could go back there next week and do what you wanted to do.
In a taped interview shortly before he returned to Guatemala, he was asked about the shape of his ministry if he were to go back to his mission.
With the present political situation, that's hard to determine right now. You're aware that 2.5 months, almost 3 months ago, because of the political situation in the country, I had to leave. And I think when I go back, whenever that will be, my ministry will be different.
Why did he go back? In his conscience, he felt that he had to go back. that was his niche. That was his family. That's where he was able to identify with people. That's where he met tremendous amount of approval from the people who were there. They accepted him as their pastor, as their helper, as their friend. So with that, he had to go back home. I think that would probably be the best way to say it. He had to go back home.
Stanley spent a week here at the Mount, and I would see him for meals, but then during the day he would be in the seminary chapel praying. He would be in the garden making the Stations of the Cross, and then he would climb the mountain to his beloved grotto, which he loved so dearly.
As the director of the grotto, I wanted to learn more about Father Stanley Rother. I understood that he came to the seminary and he would come up here to the grotto. There was so much that he did here. He worked with the current director at that time, Monsignor Hughes Phillips, and he worked with Monsignor Phillips. Every day he would get prayers and requests to light candles, and Father Stanley would come here to the grotto cave and light the candles. He would actually enter them into his journal on how many candles he lit that day. He became such a resource and an asset to the grotto that he became the assistant chairman of the grotto while he was here in seminary. I was amazed to learn that when he came back from Guatemala and was trying to decide what he should do, should he go back to be with his people, or should he stay here in the United States? He knew that he would probably die if he would go back. So he spent a week or so going around the United States and visiting, and he came back here to Mount St. Mary Seminary, to the college. And while he was here, he visited the grotto. And here at the grotto, he walked the pathway of the Stations of the Cross, prayed in the Corpus Christi Chapel, and he walked back down to the path and made the decision to go back to Guatemala.
I can only imagine what that meditation must have been like. Because here is Father Rother, who knows that he is on a way to the cross. Knowing that his name was on a death list, he knew people who had already been killed in his very parish, catechists and religious and others, and even other priests who would have been in the area that had their life either threatened or had been harmed or even killed. He knew that he was literally, at that moment of retreat, walking the Stations of the Cross. At the end of those stations isn't the crucifixion, right? We know that that's the 12th station, right? We know that our Lord was taken down from the cross. We know our Lord was placed into the tomb, and that ultimately that tomb is empty on Easter Sunday. So that way of the cross, that way of Christ, is a way to heaven, but it's not an easy way. It's a difficult way. It's literally a way of the cross. And Father Rother had to face that, and he was willing to make that way. So for any of the seminarians, those elements are really important for their daily life. That week of retreat or so is very characteristic of what seminary life should be like too. It should be a life in which that discernment, the decision involves kneeling, right? Prayer first. We put a great emphasis here on the Mount of the Holy Hour, as you know, saying to our men, you just have to incorporate into your life an hour of prayer a day, and before the Blessed Sacrament, a time of real intense prayer every day if you're going to be able to respond well to a vocation every day as a priest. It intimately involves the presence of Our Lady who is both example, guide, and intercessor. And life as a priest isn't easy. As any other vocation is not always easy. There are crosses involved all along the way.
And at the end of the week, he said, I know what I must do. I must speak. His archbishop at the time wrote to him and he said, don't you think it would be wise for you to come back to Oklahoma City because you're on a hit list? And Stanley wrote back and said, the shepherd cannot run at the first sign of danger. Pray for me that I might be a sign of the coming of Christ for these good people. And at the end of the week here, he said to me personally, I know what I must do. I need to go back and I need to speak. But he also told me something else. He said, they will never take me out and shoot me in the country and leave my body or throw my body in a well. He said, I will put up a fight. And he was as strong could be.
We read as follows from the words of Archbishop Harry Flynn. Stan told me terrible things that were happening to the Indian people, including a group of Indians who had been shot to death outside the village, the Archbishop recalled. And he said to me, that is to Archbishop Flynn, he said to me, if I stay there and speak, I will be deported or killed. At the end of the week, he told me, I know what I must do. And then Archbishop Flynn added, it was like the Lord in the Garden of Gethsemane. He did indeed leave the Mount. He returned back to Okarche, Oklahoma, had a tearful farewell, one would imagine, with his parents, returned to Guatemala into the greatest intensity of warfare, guerrilla warfare, that he had experienced up to that point. In the very early morning hours of July 28th, 1981, some individuals broke into the rectory. A young man who was staying there shouted up to Father Stanley for help. Father Stanley came out to help. 2 shots to the head, and he was dead.
They asked me to tell them where the father was. I wanted to tell them that he was just on the first floor. But at the point of the pistol, they told me that I had to take them to where the father was. So I took them down. They wanted me to tell him that there was a bomb on the second floor and that he should go and look for it. But I didn't want to tell them that, so I said, Father, they're looking for you.
I was doing some work on the tractor, and Father Beckman and Joe Grellner come out to tell me. I seen this car drive up, and when Father Beckman got out of the car, I raised up and I said, Father, I said, they didn't get him out of the house, did they? I knew just the minute I seen him, he was just as pale, and Grellner was, you could tell that there was something. He says, no, he said, but Stan told me, he says, if they ever come and get me, they're not going to get me out of the house.
I was sitting in the downstairs dining room of the Chancery office in Albany, New York, and I read in the Times-Union of his death, and I was angry. And I had that same anger.
Was anger. That is
and I had that same anger when I sat in the room in which I looked at his blood on the wall, and I could not help but wonder, how could anyone have done this to such a good person? Not that you would do such a thing to a bad person, but Stanley stood out so well in my mind as a man of great integrity, great purpose, and so filled with God, so beautifully filled with God, that I was angry that someone would try to destroy that.
When I came here and saw his body, and helped prepare his body, the first thing I felt was just unbelievable anger, and profound anger, deeper than I've ever felt before or since. And it was so terribly and completely meaningless to me. And then Sister Ana Gloria Gonzalez, a Mexican Carmelite sister who was here at the time, kept the people singing hymns of resurrection in church. And I personally believe that she kept the people from rising up and really becoming violent.
I guess in the back of my mind, I often wondered what I would do if we really did hear that this had happened. But I don't think you can in any way prepare yourself for it. I was shocked. I guess it just takes a long time to really get through something like that. We realize our life is only for a short time, and yet we hate to see it taken in a way like that.
I was working that day on the newspaper, and we had already taken it to Edmond to be printed when I got a telephone call, and they said Father Rother has been murdered in Guatemala, and it was really a shock. All of us were crying and in our office, and I think it was the same kind of response of those who knew him, that there was a really deep emotional response, as well as a shock that this had actually happened. And I know personally, for about a week or so, whenever I tried to speak about it in church, in homilies and stuff, I couldn't talk. I would get too choked up.
I went down there after his death. The Indian people loved him so very, very much that they would not let anyone touch his body until they had his heart. And Father Greg Schaefer, a priest of New Ulm, Minnesota, who was in the mission on the other side of Lake Atiyan, told me himself that when he got over to Stanley's mission, the Indian people had surrounded the rectory and again would not let anyone touch the body until they had his heart. And Mr. Rother back in Oklahoma didn't want them to do that. And yet Father Greg Schaefer told me himself that he talked to Mr. Rother on the phone and said, "You've got to let them do this because your son was so loved by these people and it would mean so much to them." And finally, Mr. Rother, according to Father Schaefer, acquiesced. And I went down to Guatemala and brought his heart to its final resting place in the church. And I will always remember the intense love that those people had for this great priest and this great man. Intense love. And it's so important that we have a person like this raised up now by the church for beatification and hopefully for canonization, who lived that gospel not politically, but lived it with all the gospel ramifications that would take place after he lived it. And that, one of the gospel ramifications, was his own martyrdom.
We followed up by coming over here for 3 years, my companion John and I. And as we saw the response of the people and their response to Stan, to Padre Francisco, to Aplas, and the spirit, and all going through dangerous and very difficult times, but always maintaining that spirit of going forward, doing the very best we possibly can under whatever conditions they are. And this church just simply flourished. And so I slowly but surely came to realize, indeed, the blood of martyrs is the seed of Christians.
We are ordained not for ourselves. We are ordained for God's people. And we become the servants of God's people. And we are not ordained to be a class all by ourselves, because the very purpose of the foundation of this seminary on a college campus, at that time all men, but now a co-ed campus, the very purpose is to be educated alongside women and men who are being trained for other professions. And we in this venerable seminary, which I love, are being trained to serve God's people and serve them generously and without any thought of any overly inconvenience to ourselves.
Stanley Rother turned out to be the best of all the missionaries we ever had there, and also the one who was the most persevering.
For all the things that he hoped for his people, and that was, at one time he said he could give them so very little, but if he could just give them a faith to live by in the midst of their oppression, that would be the least that he could do.
What an inspiring story. Our Holy Father, Pope Francis, gave the go-ahead, if you will, for the beatification of Stanley Francis Rother, because he died in odium ecclesiae, in hatred of the church. a man who loved the church, a man who gave so many years to the priesthood, 1963 to 1981, a man who loved the church, died for the church, died violently for the church. His mortal remains were brought back to Holy Family Cemetery in Okarche, Oklahoma, to be buried in the family plot, except for his heart. His heart was removed, and it was placed in the village church at Santiago Atiyan. And Archbishop Harry Flynn sometime later made a personal pilgrimage, and he took the heart of Blessed Rother and brought it up to the front of the church and placed it in a shrine, if you will, where to this day, in that humble church in southwest Guatemala, you can visit the heart, pray before the heart of Blessed Stanley.
In the summer of 2015, I believe it was, one of our seminarians was down in Guatemala, and he visited the parish of Father Rother's, Santiago in Atitlan. He told the parishioners there that he was a seminarian at Mount St. Mary's Seminary, the place where Father Rother went to school. And they said, "Oh, you're from the Mount?" And they took out of the closet in the sacristy the alb, which is that long white garment that the priest wears for Mass, and he puts the chasuble over on top of it. But they took out his alb and cut a large square of it out, gave it to the seminarian and said, "Here, give this to your rector." So the seminarian brought it back, and we have now a piece of his alb. Again, it's connected with the priesthood, with the Eucharist, and in some ways also symbolic of his self-giving. Upon his beatification, I guess we could appropriately call that a second-class relic. I must say that I'm hoping and praying that we might get a first-class relic, but that's something that Father Rother is going to have to intercede for and give us. Here at Mount St. Mary's, outside of our chapel, we have a display case now dedicated to Father Rother. That's only been there just this past year. Around the time that we heard of his beatification, I thought it might be important to have some sort of permanent display of Father Rother. So we were able to find this display case and also to put out before others, visitors, as well as and particularly for the seminarians, to see some of the documents that we have and pictures that we have. There are a number of things in there that are particular to the Mount itself. You'll notice that in that display case there's his application form. I think it's only 3 pages long, and today there's a lot more to the application form than there was back then. But it has this kind of basic information. Very beautifully too, there's a line that asks the applicant to describe what his present profession is, and he puts seminarian, and then he puts in parentheses farmer, because he comes from a farm family. There's also a beautiful letter in there that Father Rother wrote in the late 1970s, just a few years before his death. And he wrote the letter to the then Father Flynn, who was rector here, describing his life in his parish, the fact that they were baptizing hundreds of children a year, the good work that he was doing with the people there. But he also describes the difficulties of the country and the threat that he sensed to his life and the life of his parishioners. So there's some wonderful things in that display case that I think highlight not only different aspects of Father Rother's life, but in particular show his presence here at Mount St. Mary's Seminary.
When I think of Stanley Rother, I think always gratefully and grateful to God that I knew such a person and that he walked in the midst of all of us in this blessed, blessed, and venerable seminary, which has sent forth so many in the United States, filled with love of God, love of Jesus Christ, and love for Mary, the Mother of Jesus.
If he came back here to his alma mater today, I wonder what he'd say to our fellows here.
But I hope he would say, be calm. The whole thing is in God's hands. Be kind. Be kind. Be kind.
What an inspiration to seminarians, what an inspiration to priests, what an inspiration to anyone who faces life's difficulties. And who would face life's difficulties? Everyone. He has something to say to the church right across the board, but most particularly to those who have followed in his stead in the sacrament of holy orders, and the young men here with us today who are preparing for that great sacrament of holy orders. May he pray for all of us from his place in heaven, and most particularly for all of us who live, who work, who pray, and who study here on Mary's Holy Mountain in Emmitsburg, Maryland.
Welcoming the wishes of our brother, Paul Stagg Coakley, Archbishop of Oklahoma City, and of many brothers in the episcopate and a multitude of the faithful, and having consulted the opinion of the Congregation for the Causes of Saints, by virtue of our apostolic authority, grant that the venerable servant of God, Stanley Francis Rother, diocesan priest and martyr, who was driven by a deeply rooted faith and a profound union with God, and by the arduous duty to spread the word of God in missionary lands, faithfully living his priestly and missionary service until his martyrdom, should henceforth be called blessed, and his feast may be celebrated in the places and according to the rules established by the law on July 28th, the day of his heavenly birth. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, amen. Given in Rome on September 14th, the feast of the exaltation of the Holy Cross, in the year of our Lord, 2017, the 5th year of our pontificate. Francis.